Well, I've talked about observation and how observation isn't this clinical observation with a clipboard and a stopwatch. It's the thing that has to filter all the way through an interaction with somebody, that I'm constantly looking for how they're feeling, what they're doing that tells me how they're feeling, that is clear all the way through. Then we've talked about how do we let the person know that we've noticed them while we speak their language. I might do that for a little bit longer than you might, doing it exactly. You might get into responding a bit earlier, but I think that's down to your experience. Possibly.
I just fall into it.
Yes, and I think we all do.
But so does Mum.
Yes,
with her baby.
Yes.
I think it's because we're unnecessarily sophisticated.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. Okay. We've talked about leaving gaps, about leaving a big enough gap for the person to assimilate what we've just done, and to decide whether they want to respond, how they want to respond. So leaving those gaps is an incredibly important thing on this list of things to bear in mind. I want to talk a little bit about mood. Is the person in the mood? We are often, those of us who are visiting people rather than part of somebody's family, we are under real pressure, like I'm here between 10 and 12 o'clock, and I have to do something with this person, but they're not in the mood. So what do I do about that? Tell me what you think about how do we deal with the situation when we're here for a limited amount of time and this person is not at this moment in the mood to have a conversation. That's often...
It's a difficult one because it's an abstract question and I think first of all I am always teaching somebody to do this.
Yes.
So when I go there, my object is to teach the support circle
or the family
yes. To how to do this,
yes.
So they can take it over me. Now, mostly I do see people who are really presenting big problems, because that's what I'm asked to do. And they saw somebody says, should we go and ask Phoebe? Sort of last resort. But so they're pretty keen to take it on, because they can actually see it work. That in a way gives me an advantage because I'm not leaving them. My aim is to set up a situation not where they have bouts or of intensive interaction, but where it becomes second nature, it becomes part of the way we interact with them all the time. So we become bilingual basically. Yes. Yeah. And we may say, like I said with a chap, who wouldn't have baths.
Yes.
And he was saying, but if you asked him to have a bath, he'd go berserk, really. I might say, Mike, Mike, bath time, and point. Yes. And off he'd go. Yeah. Because the thing that he found difficult was actually gift wrapped in his own language. So it reduced the fear. Yeah.
So you would be almost using the mood that the person is presenting you with as part of your response to enable them to move forward.
And I want the people who are with him, the school or the care home or the parents, I want them to feel free to use it all the time as a part of the way they interact with them.
It's part of a very full sorry.
It's a change in the way they relate to the person.
Yes.
And it does demand quite in the Gable film, one of the managers says, it took us about a fortnight, we really had to focus very hard. But this man was really presenting extreme difficulties. But as soon as they got it in so that during a conversation they would always be putting in some of his body language, either through gesture or they might be using his, if it's a more able person, you might use their interests. But but you are constantly, it becomes second nature.
Yes, what you're talking about is intensive interaction becoming a state of mind
Yes.
rather than a specific approach. And I think the doing it constantly isn't the doing it constantly, it's the being aware of the opportunities to constantly
Yes,
do it
exactly,
constantly.
yes.
Because, we all know people who have an attention span of, 5 seconds on a good day with a following wind. So we might be peppering their day with little snatches of intensive interaction.
The point is that every time you put in
Yeah.
a signal that the brain recognises,
Yeah. The attention span can expand.
it's like unfilings to a magnet, onto
Yes.
it. The brain, I think, whatever the mood, the brain's onto it
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
Just like the man who was bellowing and furious and banging his head on the wall and aggressive and all the things one might be. He heard his own sound, or somebody responding to that sound with empathy, but good enough response, close enough.
Yeah.
He was out looking.
Yes.
He physically came out of his
Yeah.
room to see what was happening.
Yeah.
And I've had that often. I worked with a man who was, I'd been warned that there was a problem, a big difficulty, and he was very aggressive, he would attack me. And so I sat outside his room, and he was making sounds. So I made sounds back, and he came out almost immediately, sat in the chair, and we made sounds for a bit. And then somebody came through the door, and she said, "Oh, you do look silly wearing that hat. Have you said hello to Phoebe?" And it had gone completely.
Yes, because actually that was a different language that this person and you then had
totally
to adapt to.
Disrespectful, and I was angry as well as he was.
Yeah, because your connection had been interrupted, and none of us like it.
And so actually that physically hurt, because by that time we'd established something which was, you might say, it was almost a naval cord between us.
Yes.
There was a physical connection, and when that was broken, it hurt, and I was angry, as he was. It's really, really important that we engage with them from the start with their language, and carers need to be warned. Don't bring them down and say hello to Phoebe or say hello to Janet.
Yes. So it might be good advice So it might be good advice for anybody using intensive interaction, whether it's family members or teaching assistants or care workers, to, if they're going to use this, to let the people around them know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and please don't interrupt when you see that I'm using somebody's language to connect with them, because that will interrupt the mood. So it's just that sort of flagging up, this is the support that this person and I need.
It's not so much interrupting the mood, it's actually violating something which is precious.
Yes.
And maybe for them so precious that it's the first time it's ever happened in their lives, 40 years or something.
So flagging up that this is what we're doing is really important.
Absolutely, yes. I think it probably is. And I think, you're right to bring that out, actually.
I think there are a few more things to say about time. We've talked about how for some people we need to allow enough time for this person to assimilate the experience that we're having with them, for them to be able to respond in the way they want to, and for us to carry on that conversation. We've talked about how for other people, to start with, we might be peppering their day with very short bursts of intensive interaction because they have a short attention span, and you've said how that will absolutely help that person attend more because we are speaking in their language, so those moments of attention will stretch. What about how long do we carry on using intensive interaction? How do we get as much consistency as possible in people's lives?
Well, we are trying to teach as many people who are concerned with them, so what we want is parents and schools or resource centres. We're trying to, the easiest way to do this is with film, and with adults, of course, you've got to get consent. But it's really, really vital that more people who can use it, because all you're doing is putting in an environment they can understand, which otherwise, you do it for a little bit and then you stop. I remember, but I think you do it quite casually. I was in a day centre and there was this chap who didn't do anything, but at lunchtime they made him sit next to me, and he was terrified, and he was doing this with his fork. So, of course, I did it back to him. And he started to be really interested. And after lunch, I had to go and see another group. And he came and he stood at the door. And he did this on the radiator. And he looked at me very firmly.
Are you going to?
So, yeah, you're going to. So I did it back. And then we came to the end of the afternoon. And I said, oh, it's time we all went home. And he looked at me, non-verbal, and said, time, go home. So I'd reduced the stress by using interaction, the intensive interaction so much that he was actually able to speak. Yeah. And this is not unknown. And what is interesting is that when you use it consistently, it lowers the stress level so much. The brain's able to do a lot of things that it couldn't. And one of the things, my experience is, that when you liberate, you reduce the stress and they start to actually be able to use the mode to make the connections. One of the first things they say is, I love you, to their parents usually. And this is quite extraordinary. It's really, really important that this becomes a consistent part of their lives. So we don't go in and rush, at least I prefer it, if people don't rush in. Right, we're going to have a session, we do it and then we stop and we go away. Because that removes from them the one thing which is absolutely vital in their lives and they've missed out on so far. But that we use it much as I might come into a room and say, Janet, and I might use your name as well. But another one where we were using it consistently with a young man who'd just gone to a day centre, and he would hit everybody who went past. Not badly, but enough to have 2 or 3 people there to see it didn't get escalate. And several times a day he would start throwing chairs and tables around. Well, they didn't throw him out, which was much to their credit, because he was a difficult man to meet his needs. And I got them using his sounds, which were and it was like and we reduced the number of outbursts which were recorded when the chairs and tables started flying around from 4 or 5 times a day to 2 in 6 months. So basically we had eliminated them. We're pretty sure he had toothache on that day. But now you could take him you couldn't take him out before because he would attack people randomly. But now you could take him out because every time he says, somebody answers him. It's like putting cat's eyes in the road. It tells the person where's it safe to go. It gives them a safe environment. But
when we take those cat's eyes out, we haven't got the safe environment.
You haven't got the safe environment.
So we need to make sure there's...
And so he can now go into a pub and he'll say, he was non-verbal, and he'll put his money on the bar and say Coke and then go and sit down and wait. Because he knows that every time he makes a sound, he will get a response. They need to get to the stage where if they do something, they will get a response in a language which has meaning for that particular person's brain. Now that, I think, is what we should be aiming for.
I think that's a really important phrase. I think it's what we should be aiming for. It's absolutely what we should be aiming for. To liberate, I love the way you use the word liberate, to liberate people from a sense of not being recognised or confirmed or communicated with.
Straitjacket, really.
To having that opportunity. That's what we're aiming for. A lot of us work in situations that are not ideal, and I think there is a real danger of us saying, if it can't be perfect, then we won't try. And people wait for, we need to have consistency, everybody needs to be trained, and we won't try it until we're in that situation. I'm afraid of the crumbs are better than no bread at all school of thought, that we really need to try this, even if it's not perfect situation, even if it isn't as consistent as it could be. We need to throw this person a lifeline here, see how they respond, and then do as much as we possibly can to flag up their response, in the knowledge that through situations beyond our control, often to do with funding or misunderstanding of what our purpose is, that lifeline might be removed. But I do think we've got a responsibility to throw the lifeline anyway. And
yes,
and
I
try
would
and make
agree
the
with
most
you.
of it. It's not ideal.
I'm only seeing people once on the whole,
Yes.
and I have to teach the family
Yes.
to deal with this,
Yeah.
how to do it. But I think one thing I'd like to move on is that actually there's an awful lot of mystique about this, and you don't actually have to be an expert.
No, some of the best interactors I've ever met are people who've never heard of intensive interaction,
Exactly.
but are quite naturally speaking the person's language. They're using the body language, they're using even the posture. They're on the floor when the person's on the
Basically,
floor.
they're like mum responding to the infant.
Because they are naturally empathetic.
But, yes, exactly, but it is not, on the other hand, infantilizing an adult that you're doing with it. It is valuing that person so much that you learn their language.
Yeah, I think it's essentially very
It is not taking them back to babyhood.
No, but it is respecting the stage of development that they're at, because there is so much pressure, especially on older students in schools and colleges and adults, to think chronologically you should be here, so this is how we should be using our language with you. Yeah. But actually this is the stage of development this person is at, and unless I do all I can with intensive interaction to make this stage of communicative development as full and exciting and as joyful as possible, then actually I'm not attending to any of their needs. I have to be
They
here.
go on being in their cocoon.
Yes. I'm just looking them there because I want them to be here.
Yes.
So it's again.
Now this is the problem about the stage they're at. For example, if you get this sort of divorce between left and right, which was about 40%, it was a surprisingly high figure. There was damage there. No amount of persuasion is going to actually move them on to some other form of communication.
This is what they need here.
And another thing is, for example, with the visual problems, do you remember the piggy noses where they had a black disc in the front? They may not see the PEX cards or the flashcards, and no amount of persuasion. Yeah. Now, in that case, I suspect actually that, and I do know where it is corrected by using coloured lenses.
Yeah.
So, you need to do that before the person. Yeah. And also the people who, for example, can't use money.
Yes.
They can't actually see the white money. Yeah. They can see the copper ones, but you'll never teach them until you've addressed the sensory problem, which is one of...
Which is a lovely way of bringing this back to responsive communication and bringing the two sides of this approach together. Which, unless we understand the sensory needs of the person, we are clouding the issue by not attending to those sensory needs, any more than if we were clouding the issue by not responding to their physical needs. Yeah. You're not going to very successfully, intensively interact with somebody who's got appendicitis if you don't attend to the appendicitis.
Well, one thing I want to talk about is I'm saying you can kickstart a conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
You don't have to wait for... Once you know the language, you don't have to wait for them to make an utterance. Now, this works. You come in the door... and instead of saying, hello, Janet, sorry. Hello, Janet, you go, if that's the sort of noise that you're making or flapping, you might say, hi. And you actually do, part of their language is used to kickstart the conversation. And this works.
Because it's making yourself available.
Well, more
in a way that is understood.
It's actually in a way that's understood.
Yeah.
It's actually giving them a signal which has meaning for them.
And also, it's a conversation opener, isn't it? In their own language. Oh, this is the person who speaks my language. Yeah. And it's that sort of recognition. Right. Yeah. But yes, and I think the rule is always that if you are going to kickstart an intensive interaction, you kickstart it with something which is absolutely already
dead centre.
Part of their own repertoire.
Their own repertoire. Out of their own sort of lexicon, their dictionary. Part of the parameter, within the parameters of their own language. But it's much more effective than starting it by introductions.
Yes. Politely and conventionally by saying hello, and actually what you need to do is
Yeah.
Okay. We were talking earlier about the steps of intensive interaction and pausing and things like this. One of the most important things is stopping when your partner's had enough. And I heard Dave Hewitt at a conference a few years ago answer a question from the floor, which is, what are the rules of intensive interaction? And he said there's only one, it's stop when your partner has had enough. And I think that's brilliant. I think if we carry in our heads that when you are seeing the signs, either somebody's kind of glazing over or they're turning away or they're physically moving away, if at that point I follow them, then I'm imposing myself into that interaction.
Yes,
and it's
right.
absolutely key here that the person feels in charge of that conversation.
Yeah,
doesn't mean
right.
to say I'm giving up all responsibility for this person.
Yeah.
Of course I'm not. But during that conversation, they need to know that the pace of it, the content of it, the rhythm of it, they are in control of. So I need to stop when my partner's had enough.
Yes, I think that's so, but I think this is one of the things about not having sessions.
Yes.
If you weren't doing it all the time,
Yeah.
I don't bore you by going on forever, possibly.
I can always leave, Phoebe.
Yeah, all right. I won't follow you.
Yeah.
It's just like ordinary conversation,
Yes.
basically. It
But
becomes
the
rules
way you
are
did
the
it,
same.
if we go back to the Gabriel exchange in learning the language, there's a lovely point quite early on. You're in the kitchen area together and he's been stroking the surface and you've been doing that with him. Then he stomps off. And what you do is you stay still and you stomp.
I do. I echo the rhythm.
You
of
echo his rhythm, but you're telling him really clearly, yes, I notice you're stomping away. I'm noticing because, look, you can hear me stomping, but you can hear me stomping but not moving.
Yeah.
So you're telling him incredibly clearly, I'm not following you. I accept that this is at an end. And that's a very natural and instinctive way of flagging up that, yeah, this is on your terms. I've noticed that you're going. I'm still here.
But later on, he goes away.
Mm.
I need to leave him just that little second or two. He'll come back.
Yes.
Because he's really hooked by that time.
Absolutely. But at the beginning stage, you're being so clear about, you're in charge here. You're in charge. Okay. We wanted to talk a little bit about self-consciousness because many people say, I see what you're doing and I see it works, but I can't do that. It's such, when we allow ourselves to be natural, we all do this. We all do it. The number of times as we've been filming over the last couple of days that we're unconsciously copying each other's body language. Yeah. We do it all the time. Adults do it with other adults who don't have autism, who don't have a learning disability of any description. We do it. We copy each other's body language. And all we have to do here is just think, how can I do that more consciously for this person? You have a lovely way of putting this. I don't know if you remember about when you were feeling self-conscious. It's because your consciousness...
it's because you're worrying about what other people are thinking around you, rather than actually focusing on the people that you are being paid to work with.
Self-conscious means conscious of self rather than conscious of the people I'm paid to work with.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But it's far more, of course, as a joke. I mean, it's the people that I want to engage with.
Yes.
Not I want to engage them, but I want to have a talk with, a chat with. Mm-hmm. Within their language. Yeah. Because it's always worthwhile. This is extraordinary. Once you get that flow between you, you get to see, again, in the Gabriel film, is radiant.
Yes.
Absolutely radiant. Yeah. And you can feel, but the interesting thing is, so am I. So that it becomes a mutual exchange. Yeah. And it is extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah. And the more moments like that you get, the less conscious, the less self-conscious you get.
The less self-conscious you get.
Yeah.
Also, I think what's happening probably is you get a flow of oxytocin.
Oh, so the real pleasure of it.
You're actually getting the physical feedback, which is actually the thing which changes people.
Yes.
I suspect that's what's going on there.
Yes.
This is where you are affecting not just temporary change, but change which lasts, and it can go on over years. I've had people come back years later when they haven't seen me, and they see me, they're there immediately. I want this.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's
I want
absolutely
this
true.
human connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Curiously enough, it doesn't turn sexual very often. I've only had once or twice. People can be afraid of it, of this. But even though you're using touch, it doesn't seem to turn sexual. Quite frankly, I think they are so starved of contact that
meaningful contact,
contact that. And all they're getting is all this stuff which they don't understand sensually.
I think
that even overrides the desire for sexual contact.
Well, I think that's a really important point to have a quick look at, really. I think what we're doing with intensive interaction, responsive communication, is modelling and supporting social contact. Yeah. The more social contact we give this person an opportunity to explore, the less likely it is that social contact remains my only possibility for contact, and the pressure of that makes it sexual. And I think we're modelling the difference between sexual excitement and social connection. We have in the team always had examples of, yes, when somebody gets excited, their experience of excitement is very close to their feeling of sexual excitement.
Erotic experience.
Yes. Yeah. So rather than doing less of it, actually what we need to do is more of it, so we're carrying on modelling the social excitement and they're getting that opportunity. And yes, of course, if somebody's getting sexually aroused, what I might do is just lower the tone of what I'm doing and maybe bring this to a close now and come back later. But I'm going to give them as many opportunities for exciting social connection as they need, because that will model the difference.
I want to talk about excitement,
yes,
because one of the things is people say, they go over the top and it's all becomes too much for them, and of course one has had that experience. I do have to emphasise that when I'm working with someone, I'm always trying to centre them. Yes. So my sounds will come down, but even my questions will be not
because what you're aiming for is this centred,
I want a centred person.
Anxiety state.
Yes,
because
exactly.
when we're in that centred, low anxiety state, then that person has got an opportunity to explore other avenues.
All sorts of things. They can generalise, they can do copy hand movement, they can do all sorts of things they're not supposed to be able to do because they're autistic.
Yes. But if I'm properly
communicate, if they're properly centred, and I am too, I'm always trying. I'm not trying to stimulate them. No. I'm trying to engage.
Yeah. Now that's interesting, because that gets back to me to the purpose of intensive interaction and what the purpose isn't, because I think there are a few things that intensive interaction isn't, which is really useful to bear in mind. It's nothing for me to do with entertaining or stimulating the person.
Absolutely.
There's nothing wrong.
Playing games. It's not about playing games.
No. There's nothing wrong with playing games with people if that's what they want to do. There's nothing wrong with entertaining and stimulating people if that's where they want to be. But my purpose in intensive interaction is to help that person feel as attended to as possible, which helps lower their anxiety rates state, which gives them the opportunities they have to explore social connection in the way they want to explore it. So it's
when you say that you're attending to them in a way that's meaningful for them.
Absolutely.
I think you have to put that bracket in, because it's so easy for us to attend to people without actually focusing on what is it that has meaning for this particular individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I think is really important to bring attention to is that I don't think intensive interaction is a way of changing somebody's behaviour. It's not a way of deliberately thinking, that behaviour of I want to stop that.
It's a way.
Absolutely, that's a wonderful bonus. Okay?
Yes, it's a wonderful bonus.
My purpose in observing this person's behaviour isn't to identify the one I want to end, to stop. It's to identify all the opportunities I've got for helping that person feel as centred and as attended to as possible. When that person is feeling listened to, they are far less likely to feel distressed.
Filling the enormous gap in their lives, which is a gap of warmth, self-centred, not self-centred centred in self.
Yes.
As opposed to fragments to which things happen to.
Yeah.
you know, it's their lives are empty in many ways.
In some
They're
ways,
filled
yes.
with fragments.
Yeah.
And we want to try and bring wholeness to that person.
It's right back to your point about coherence.
Yes.
If what we're going for through intensive interaction and through an understanding of this person's sensory need is a feeling of coherence, when I feel at my most coherent, my behaviours are actually calm and connecting and all of those things.
Yeah.
My behaviours are not distressed. Okay, so the wonderful byproduct of intensive interaction, responsive communication, is that it does help people behave in a way that is less distressed. So it does stop behaviours. My purpose. So often I get asked that. You know, I have somebody who plays with spit.
How can I deal with
stop
this?
them?
How can I stop them?
No, we look at it first, rather than deciding.
I get that all the time.
Yeah. So we don't. The starting point is always observation. It's never how can I stop them doing that.
Yes,
and I think if we start from that end, we've got a problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when you get this amazing flow between to yourself and the person who you're engaged in, and they are engaged with you, and you get this extraordinary flow, then it's not just they who are changed.
No.
It's oneself that's changed.
Yeah.
And you never forget that person. You might forget their name, but you never ever forget the affective link that is drawn between you.
And then that to me forms that lovely basis for a continuing change in relationship.
Exactly.
For the people who are there on the spot using intensive interaction day in, day out, the chances of that relationship becoming more and more satisfying for both of them. And I think there is some evidence, somebody's done some study, and I can't quote it, about the impact that using intensive interaction in a workplace has on the turnover of staff. And there is some evidence about it lowering the turnover of staff.
I've certainly had people saying to me, you know, nowadays I can't wait to come into work.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
I'm just I'll come in on my day off. Because I'm so involved with this. But you know, you're giving yourself away, but you're getting back the most extraordinary relationship, which it changes oneself as well.
And I think that's because there is a huge amount of trust and respect inherent in this approach. And that works both ways. This person is trusting you. They are feeling the respect you have for them. Yeah. That's a very, very precious thing.
Very, especially if you've never had it.
Yeah.